Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Monday Bagel, the podcast where we explore how law, technology, and society shape one another in real time. Today, I'm joined by someone whose career sits at one of the most unique intersections we've had on the show. My guest is Tim Carter, a seasoned tech executive, lawyer, IP specialist, and entrepreneur with more than 25 years of experience across business, law, and technology. Tim led Google's Android team across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, co-founded an iHealth nonprofit that now screens more than 6 million people a year, and most recently he helped to build Hollywood's first consent infrastructure that lets actors control the use of their digital likeness in production using AI. He is also the co-founder of Carmenline, developing next-generation film production software, and serves as a trustee and board member of multiple organizations. And as you'll hear, he brings a rare dual perspective from both Hollywood and the legal profession. Tim, welcome to Monday Bagel, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Michael.
So you've worked in both Hollywood and legal world. What parallels do you see between how creatives and lawyers react to emerging technologies like AI?
This is a surprising number, I would say. It's very natural for anybody looking at new automations to imagine that their jobs might be enabled or disabled or intermediated, I think, by new technology. And that's quite common between lawyers and people in the creative industries. I think in Hollywood, I think there's a curiosity about how these tools can be put to use for the existing skill sets that exist. And Hollywood obviously has a wide range of deep skills in front of the camera and behind the camera, many of which can make use of tools. Just as the law is obviously incredibly broad and varied in terms of how people specialize and the types of work they do. But the concerns come, I guess, primarily in two different areas. One is, will this remove the intellectual challenge of what I'm doing? Am I just here to operate the machinery and all of the intelligence is in the machinery? And the other is, does it actually replace some or all of my job altogether? So either I or maybe younger generations end up being redundant because the automation is taking over. And then that raises a lot of existential questions for us as professionals on both of those paths.
So that's striking, different industries, but the psychology seems remarkably similar. In your recent talk when we discussed at iTech Law in London, you described AI in Hollywood as both massive opportunity and source of existential anxiety. Can you describe what opportunities and fears you see? And is this fear real for actors and writers? And can it be similar for lawyers?
There are real fears because there are elements of work that humans do today that can be automated and therefore reduce opportunities for employment. A lot of lower complexity voiceover work, for example, in acting, where the audience or the client can live with a less human approach. They can rely on machinery to do synthesized voice work. Similarly with background actors, where you just need people in the background doing things and they are not kind of delivering the core performance of a piece. Again, you could already automate some of those with traditional software tools, but the AI automations that we have now with generative video, etc., make those much more easy to access and higher fidelity. So again, there may be reduced work for background actors. So it's partly true, but it's also in other areas. I think the main concern about machinery taking over the editorial choices in terms of writing scripts, or at the far extreme, what gets called AI filmmaking, where people imagine the story and the decisions about what to shoot, and maybe even the actors are entirely synthesized by software, and the editorial and creative choices are made by software, is not, I would say, a threat. There may be a market for that sort of content, but I don't think that replaces the people that are making those editorial choices today, because it doesn't communicate a voice or a perspective that a filmmaker or a writer is trying to communicate, or that a performer gives. The serendipity and the fluke, or the variability of human performance, is unique. It's literally on the spot. And the reason that there's this interaction between directors and cinematographers and the cast is that there's humans interacting there, and capturing that moment is unique. which by definition cannot be done by software. In the law, I think there are opportunities with kind of undertaking repetitive and routine work. So filling in forms and reviewing vast numbers of documents for anomalies or consistencies or particular terms, whether that's in discovery for litigation or due diligence in the corporate world, should, I'm sure, be making much more use of technology than it is today. And having been a trainee 20 odd years ago, and sitting in data rooms and paginating lever arch folders full of papers and trying to go through and summarize warranties and indemnities, etc. At the time, I was not convinced that that was a foolproof way of finding out what the issues were and what the disclosures needed to be. And so replacing some of that work with machinery should actually provide a better, more scalable outcome. You still need human beings for all of the other aspects of law. And I think lawyers who understand that their role for clients is to help guide them, be a human relationship, understand their business, understand the context of their deal or their litigation, that is where the real value comes. People typically don't hire law firms, they hire lawyers. And when lawyers move between firms, you do see clients move, and that's because they've built up that human connection with that lawyer. And I think that's the thing that any level of automation emphasizes. It points out that there's an equalization of knowledge. The law is the same for all the lawyers that are working in that jurisdiction, but the interpretation or the application of that knowledge to your client's needs, that's really where the intelligence and the bespoke value of human beings comes in. And a good human being that can leverage technology will always be superior to that same human being without that leverage. But it doesn't, I don't think the technology elevates an average human being to being the greatest analyst.
Let's hope so. But what was striking for me is what was part of your presentation where you presented opportunities as well, because we very often we discuss fears, and this is really relevant to avoid to get rid of these fears or to think about them as you just said. But what about opportunities? What opportunities Hollywood sees in AI? How can we leverage AI? Maybe we can parallel something to legal world as well.
Well, certainly in Hollywood, the opportunities for AI, I guess, are twofold. One is to make the same thing that is made today, but cheaper, or more effectively, get more reduced budgets and get more value for the budgets that you're spending. The other is, it gets called democratization, which I think is heading in the right direction, but really it's about providing people who don't have the budget to do the work that very high budget films and TV shows do in terms of sets and effects and things like that cost most of the money in production, and giving tools to people or making tools available to people so that they can uprate their productions at a much lower cost. So one hopes, and certainly the opportunity is, that people who are currently priced out of the system to tell their stories, either because their stories are not taken up by the mainstream buyers in the system, or they only have a particularly niche audience, but they're still valuable to tell. There shouldn't be a reason why more niche stories should be lower quality. And if generative tools in AI are really enhanced and made use of, you should be able to see more voices, more stories coming through, and achieving the sort of quality that audiences have got used to. We as audiences have got so spoiled with expecting very high production values, especially over the last 10 years, because the transition from the old studio system and the TV networks to streamers who have used external capital from outside the industry to buy their way into dominance in the industry, so Netflix, Amazon, etc., they have set very high budgets and equally high production standards in the industry. And it is possible that some of those will become attainable to people on much lower budgets, which I think is definitely a good thing.
So, what would the parallel to legal world look like? Smaller law firms being able to compete with big top international legal networks? Is that a good parallel? Or entering new market quite cheaper with new capabilities of AI tools?
Well, I wonder if on the big transactions where there's just a huge volume of paperwork to go
Mm-hmm.
through,
Mm-hmm.
if that paperwork can be mechanized, or the preparation and the analysis of large volumes of paperwork, which typically today are the realms of big firms that have large numbers of paralegals and junior lawyers, that might become much more accessible to a wider range of firms. Certainly in my experience, quality of legal advice is not correlated to the size of the firm. There are lots of sole traders and small practices that provide very, very high quality legal advice, often in very particular domains, either local to them or in particular industry niches. But they are priced, where they are sort of kept out of the larger, highest value deals in their industries because they just don't have the human capacity to handle them. So there's one opportunity, I think, for automation to expand client access to all of those high skill sets, no matter what size firm people are working in. And a lot of the other stuff, it's more so accountants do more of this. Accountants do a lot more compliance routine work, obviously filing statutory accounts and taxes, etc. Lawyers do less of that, but there is a certain amount of routine work that lawyers are involved in. And the automation of that, again, might open up the sorts of efficiencies that you see with firms that specialize in insurance work and mortgage work, mortgage support, things like that. Those kind of standard areas of law where there's a lot of compliance and much less analysis on a case by case basis as a proportion of what the work is done. Maybe there'll be more fields where that can be expanded, and so automation can do more of the computation of standard work. And again, maybe that levels the playing field. Maybe it allows specialist firms to come in that are powered primarily by automation to do those niche areas of work at either a faster or more consistent or cheaper rates.
Almost everyone who knows Hollywood as good as me, so not too much, is aware of strikes against AI. I think so. They were driven by control, consent, and compensation, I would say. What do you think if lawyers were to articulate their own three pillars for AI adoption? Would it be the same or something else?
They would probably be different. It's a great question. I think clients would love cost always to go down. I think lawyers would like compensation always to go up. So part of it is sort of true across the different sides of the equation. But for me, if there are three words that summarize what lawyers will want to focus on as they adopt AI technologies, trust is the first word that comes to my mind. At the end of the day, if a client and their lawyer fail to create a trustful relationship, then none of the other downstream value from that relationship can happen. And lawyers will need to work hard to understand AI technologies and how they're either using them in their practice or how they're delivering them to the benefit of their clients so that trust is maintained or even enhanced. Allied to that is possibly speed or scale. Those are the opportunities for law firms as businesses. Can you deliver the same or even higher quality advice to more clients, or can you deliver that advice to clients with less delay? Clients will pay premiums for the speed of the reaction of their lawyers. I mean, one of the reasons lawyers typically work long hours and have high pressure jobs is because the speed of their reaction to client requirements is a key part of the service that they're delivering. And I guess the third one, maybe it's agility, maybe it's any individual lawyer or law firm being able to leverage AI tools to provide more experiences, more unique or more tailored advice to their clients, to be able to leverage, as you said, cross-border relationships, knowledge, or people in one department being able to leverage the knowledge of another department more easily, accessing routine understandings of, I don't know, tax or HR law in the context of commercial work without that kind of cross delay when you've got different departments trying to coordinate their time and put people on matters. And so, yeah, I think agility is a definite possibility and upside for AI tools. So yeah, trust, speed and scale, and agility would be mine. That's 4 words, but if I mash speed and scale together, then you get to 3.
So a bit different than in creative industry. And I wonder if we have unions to fight for lawyers' rights as they did in Hollywood. This is also the question.
Yeah, I think, and the role of regulators is really key, right? So in certainly in the UK, for example, the regulator and the legal union, no longer exactly the same organization. But when you push lawyers and legal work into the bigger political sphere under which everybody's operating, because the law is always a derivation of politics. It's politicians that make laws, obviously. The general public always thinks that it's lawyers that make laws, but of course it's lawyers that have to interpret what politicians have delivered them and make the best of it. And there's always that additional realm where lawyers, in many ways, are on the front line of maintaining things that are either in the law or should be in the law. So the social angle of what legal work involves, I think, is it's touched upon by automation. What do you automate? Where do you outsource trust or the influence of trust mechanisms into software? When you've got automated decision making in judicial environments or even in commercial trading arrangements where lawyers are involved, it's not quite the same as in Hollywood, where people are using their union representation to defend their right to work and their ability to work, which is a much, I think, more distant issue for most lawyers. But there are different issues about social policy that I think do crop up.
So coming back to you as a kind of bridge between legal and creative world, one more question. What's the most misunderstood aspect of AI's impact on creative work and AI's impact on legal work?
In creative work, I think the misunderstanding is this question about editorial. The lay person, and I think a lot of people in creative jobs, understandably focus on the outsourcing of intellectual choices into software. And that's really not where the power of software and automation, whether AI or any other form of software, comes into play. And I think understanding AI as a set of methods that should be or could be adopted by creative workers in the process of being creative. There's an awful lot of work in creative work, and often much less creativity and much more work. You talk to any artist or any creative professional, they work hard, and their creative element of that work is essential to it, but it's not sufficient. There's a huge amount of laborious activity that goes into executing creative work. So I think that's the point in creative industries. Misunderstanding in the law, I think outside of the law, the biggest misunderstanding when people think of AI within the law is that AI is some third-party decision-making mechanism, very similar, I suppose. It's less about editorial, but it's about, automated judges or automated contracts. And that misunderstands the nature of what is going on in those situations. You're making a bespoke judgment on the facts in front of you, either on how you draft the contract or what the judgment comes to. And you start with the standard, you start with the law or the template, and then you move to the particular. And that transition is where humans need to be involved, because you're either judging or making a deal between humans. And a machine can only follow the rules that it's been given in the past, whereas you're making up new rules or new nuances based on the particulars of that case or that deal. And so I think the misunderstanding there is similar, in that people imagine that robo-lawyers will be faster and cheaper, and you just absorb the law in a database and then you regurgitate it and apply it to the facts. But anybody who has tried to automate human beings, which is what lawyers would be doing, robo-lawyers are they're trying to help parties come to an agreement in some forum, knows that that just isn't how humans work. And so I think the lawyer's job is well protected.
So futurists, but also technologists and some lawyers often say that AI won't replace creatives or lawyers, but it will make them more productive. From what you say, it seems that you believe this, that this statement is true. But isn't it partly self-comforting for some groups of creatives or lawyers as well?
Yeah, I think whilst I agree with that statement in the long run, it's important to understand that the distance between where we are now and the future is a big one, and it involves change.
Mm-hmm.
You don't switch on new ways of working and new tools overnight and have instant benefit typically, especially in system level change where you've got to deal with complexity. And the change management cost, the transformation cost that is involved is significant. And I think again there's opportunity in that. The lawyers who are curious and really apply what AI tools are capable of to their particular roles, their practices, their jurisdictions, their types of work, and they build up from the knowledge of their work into what can be automated in that order. Those are the lawyers that will make the best choices and succeed the most with AI. If you start with, well, what's the technology capable of and how can I apply it in my world? That's the wrong way round. It should never be technology first and location second. So you should always ground it in a business problem, a technical problem. What's the problem? Why is that a problem today? And why will the characteristics of AI be useful in solving that problem? So again, having been involved in a lot of software platforms that have gone into new industries in disruptive ways, they often involve reworking the business model of the industry, sometimes fundamentally, often just incrementally, and getting the human beings who are being challenged or disrupted or changed in that way to understand what it is about their jobs that where their value lies and where they can automate and do that objective review and then consider the technology. It's a difficult thing to do because the technology becomes the headline. Everybody's talking about, oh, we must adopt AI. And there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
assumption built into that.
Mm-hmm.
And pausing, pushing back on those assumptions, unpicking them like we do in our day jobs. As a lawyer, you don't just take your client's instructions and go. You think about it. And often you have to push back on clients or dig in and be very curious about what do you really want to do? Applying that same analysis to technology. Why do we really want to use AI? What's the value in it? Where are we trying to get to? Are we trying to be faster? Are we trying to be more trustful? Are we trying to be more agile? Well, how are the ways that we can achieve that? What's the benefit? And then applying technology to it. That's the gap between now and this future of lawyers still having jobs and not being replaced.
But do you think there will be some groups, for instance, creatives, who are going to be replaced by technology?
Inevitably, all technical advancement replaces some work that is currently done by human beings. It's very rare that humans will invent a technology that does something that currently no human is doing. That
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't really be a good, we would make bad technology if that was our approach. We always have to start from our knowledge and understanding, and that's all AI is. Expresses intelligence, but not machine intelligence. It expresses the human intelligence that is encoded in all of the processes that make that AI software. So it goes without saying that as you change how you work and you change how you use tools, some of the tasks that used to be done don't need to be done anymore, or they need to be done differently. And tasks and jobs are obviously related, but they're often different things. Typically, the higher skilled jobs in a economy are regarded as covering many tasks, and jobs that are allied to a single task are regarded as lower skilled jobs. Now, that's not always the case. The skill, and if you look at really highly skilled craftspeople, you could categorize them as doing a single task. But of course, it's a question of what level of zoom you're looking at someone's work. But so yeah, tasks will change, and therefore jobs that are allied to a task that is automated, those jobs may evaporate. But the human beings that have the skills to do that task have the skills to do other tasks as well. So the change, I mean, if we zoom out to a societal level, if you have a large part of your population in a particular region affected by that sort of change, that is potentially on the horizon and potentially a problem. But in the law, I think it's going to be more incremental than that, and there will not be one single answer.
I fully agree. If I was asked this question maybe 2 years ago, I would say that no, people will not be replaced by technology. Right now, I also agree that some people who fulfill some very narrow tasks have to adapt or change their professions. So looking ahead, is the AI future of Hollywood a good model for legal profession? And what should lawyers learn from the last 2 years in the entertainment industry? Maybe nothing, or is there any lessons learned that we should take?
I think there are lessons. I think one lesson is to be active in your curiosity and lead the change, not be reactive and allow people outside the profession to create the conditions and the changed world that you then have to fit into. That's a debate that is continuing in Hollywood and creative industries because AI products are fundamentally built outside of these industries. They are coming from technology companies whose jobs are to build and sell technology. In the process of doing that, they end up interacting with and often disrupting other industries. That isn't fundamentally their intent. They just want to make software and sell it. But that inevitably ends up affecting the data and the workflows of other industries, their customers. So I would say a lot of people in Hollywood have been curious. There's a range of views about how to deploy that curiosity, how to understand and frame the technology, what are the mental models. And it requires a lot of introspection that, again, you've seen in Hollywood of what's the role that I have as a writer or as a performer or as a producer? What's my role as a voice actor or a technologist in the film industry, in the VFX world? If I'm a VFX artist, I'm a technologist as well as a creator because I'm deeply embedded in using the technology that I have been using for the last 5, 10, 20 years to do my work. And now there's a new form of technology. So that introspection and curiosity, I think, is the same. And doing that, the second point, I'd say doing that collectively and collaboratively. And so iTech, the conference at iTech Law was a really great example of that, where you had lawyers from all over the world, IP and data protection and technology and cybersecurity and other disciplines of law, contentious and non-contentious lawyers, collectively discussing issues and bringing their experiences, their cases, their domains into that discussion, finding the common ground and finding where things are different so that you can say with knowledge, a one-size solution will not fit everybody. And what works for a large international corporate law firm in many ways will not be the right solution for a small local, regional or individual firm. And what works for litigators in some ways won't work for transactional lawyers. Finding those distinctions happens faster through collective action and inquiry and collaboration as a profession. And I think in many ways, the legal profession already does that very well. It regards itself as an intellectual endeavor, and that is fueled by curiosity and other perspectives. And even if lawyers have strong views of their own domain, those views are only enhanced by sort of interaction with other views. I think in the legal world, there is also an advantage to some extent that the competition between lawyers is a little bit less intense. It's less corporate, I would argue. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you look at, I don't know, a studio versus another studio in Hollywood, and they're trying to work out, is AI an existential threat? What does it mean for their shareholding? What does it mean for their value, their corporate value, their enterprise value over the next 10 years? I think we're not quite at that point with law firms comparing each other. There will be distinctions between firms increasingly on technology grounds, as well as on who can recruit the best lawyers or field the broadest jurisdictions, etc. But I think there's a window of opportunity, at least, for that collaboration. And I would always advocate for that collaboration and collective analysis to continue, because at the end of the day, if the legal profession globally is strong, then, and that comes through by holding different views, but collectively, that benefits the societies that lawyers serve. I mean, lawyers are there to provide a function within social order, within commerce, within justice. And if they are collaborating inwardly and acting outwardly, then they're benefiting society the best that they can do. And I think that's the highest function that lawyers should seek.
That's a powerful message, especially because law tends to react a bit slower than creative industry, but challenges and opportunities seem more or less the same. Tim, thank you so much for this conversation. You bridge Hollywood technology and legal profession, and today you helped us to see similar challenges and opportunities. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, leave a comment, share Monday Bagel with your colleagues, and more conversations are on the way with leaders shaping the future of AI and law. So be with us. See you.